Such a beautiful feast day, and the power of St. Joseph, it just requires so many visits and revisits to really penetrate into the mystery of who he is. A man of so few words, and yet there's books, whole books written about this guy. And so for us and our purposes today, I think what the church is asking us to highlight and to focus on more than the rest is Joseph as faithful steward. I say this because the book of Samuel that the church gives us to open up with is all about the key promise that the Jews held on to. That God said through the prophet Nathan that he will build a house for his own name, he will make his royal throne firm forever, that this son is going to be born and I will be a father to him. This is the only time in the Old Testament, really, or the first time in the Old Testament that God is establishing himself as the father of whoever this Davidic heir is going to be. And your house and your kingdom shall endure forever before me. Your throne shall stand firm forever. And that promise in the Jewish mind, despite all the historical complexities that they were experiencing, the amount of times they were under siege and exiled, scattered, diaspora, impoverished, temples destroyed, like they really clung to this promise. But none more than the actual heirs of David throughout the centuries. I mean, centuries and centuries go by. And almost at the time of the Annunciation of Mary, it's about 100 years prior to that, the Jews had been in exile and everything had seemed to be lost. And even still, the lineage of David held to faith. And eventually, when they were allowed to reconstitute themselves, it was Joseph's family, his ancestors, that went and built the town of Nazareth off of the promise that a shoot shall sprout from the stump of Jesse, a netzer. So Nazareth is the town of the netzer, and they're waiting for this shoot to come. There's like maybe 150 people in this town, and this is the context in which Joseph arises out of. So what does that tell us about Joseph? Not only was he faithful, he was like at the epicenter of fidelity. I mean, there were other Jews that were faithful that went on to reconstitute themselves somewhere else and to build whole lives, even though they clung to the word of God. But it was Joseph and his family that was like, no, we want to be right where we believe it's going to happen. And even though that meant poverty, even though that meant distance from the temple of God so that they would have to travel a far way to continue to live the law of Moses, they believed so hardcore that their entire life was defined by being right at the epicenter of the location of the fulfillment of God's promises. This is Joseph. And so the second reading highlights that by borrowing language spoken of regarding Abraham and his faith, that his righteousness is counted on because of his faith. And because of that, he is made a father of many nations. And so Joseph becomes the father of the church because Christ is the head and he's the foster father of Christ. And it's because of his faith that he was there. It's because of his faith that he didn't miss what was happening. It was because of his faith that he was ready and willing to make whatever sacrifice was required to stay where he needed to be. And that's against an enormous amount of pressure. One of those pressures we experience in the gospel. This is a confusing gospel for many people because they think like Joseph is accusing Mary of infidelity. But if you notice, the angel doesn't say, Joseph, son of David, don't be embarrassed to take Mary into your house. He says, don't be afraid. Like it's happening. Everything you've been waiting for. Don't let that terrify you. You are the one that God is asking to be right here. God is with you. He will qualify you for this task. And again, Joseph believes. So what could we walk away with from all of that? That fidelity should be stable in nature. that there are going to be pressures and forces. There are going to be reasons that we can look out and say, there's just no way God's going to fulfill his promises. That there's just no way that it's going to happen, whatever this thing is, in my time. There's no way that I'm the right person for this. And what Joseph says is, trust God. Stand still. Be faithful one day after the next. Because the God who has called you will qualify you, and he will never, ever forget his promises.